The night the word nobody got stapled to my name began with valet lights and the kind of downtown glow that makes you feel like you've walked into someone else's movie. Nick and Sam sat glittering in glass and chrome on Maple Avenue, all white tablecloths and wine lists thick as Bibles. Emily squeezed my hand as we waited for the hostess, and I could feel the tiny bones in her fingers working against mine like a code I couldn't crack. She looked stunning in a navy sheath dress that caught light like water. I had pressed my best shirt twice, but under the chandeliers it still looked like a shirt you wear to fix air conditioners, which is exactly what I do. "Just be yourself," she whispered, and kissed my cheek like a promise. Her coworkers filled a long table near the back. The social media team in near-matching blazers, the sales guys with their cufflinks, a VP who smelled like money and cologne. When the hostess set down menus, the same soft chuckle followed the prices all the way around like a rumor. I felt the space at the table into which I was supposed to fit, and nodded at the man across from me who could have been the mayor of Dallas, or at least the kind of person who always sits near him. Trevor Collins slid in late with a grin that arrived 5 seconds before he did. He had the look of a man who considered himself a solution in search of a problem. Hair crisp, watch heavy, tie the exact red of a stop sign. He kissed the air near Emily's cheek, clapped my shoulder, and announced, "The guest of honor," as if he had invented sarcasm. "I'm no guest of honor," I said. "Just here for the steak." "Classic," he said, already bored. He turned to the table, lifted his glass, and in a voice pitched to carry over clinking silverware, said, "To marketing, may our Q4 be as inflated as our egos." Laughter. Emily laughed too, the polite kind. I smiled enough to show I could play along. The waiter asked about appetizers, and before I could answer, Trevor said, "He looks like a calamari guy," and ordered for me. It was small, but it landed. The kind of small thing that tells you something larger is approaching. What approached was a perfectly cooked ribeye, and, after 2 glasses of Cabernet, the question. Trevor leaned back, stared at me with an interest he hadn't earned, and said, loud enough for the VP 2 seats down to hear, "So, David, what do you do again?" "I fix broken things," I said. "Air conditioners, mostly." He sipped, considering whether the joke had been delivered yet. "Ah," he said, smiling at the table. "She married a nobody, and yet he keeps the house cool. We should all be so practical." Silence is a complex animal. It has teeth and a temperature. It can be the space that holds a person together or the air that pries them apart. The table went quiet for 1 beat, then 2, then released a little spray of nervous laughter like seltzer. The VP's mouth tightened. Someone said, "Oh, Trevor," the way a teacher says the name of a child who has thrown sand. Emily's smile trembled on her face and then steadied. She did not look at me. I was not raised for scenes. My father was a mechanic who believed that if you had to raise your voice to be heard, you had chosen the wrong words. He taught me to hold a socket wrench like a handshake. He taught me to let people have the story they needed about you because they would tell it anyway. I cut my steak, chewed, and counted fibers in the white linen, silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because my words, if I let them out, would not stop at Trevor. They would tear into Emily, into the shape of our marriage, into the little world we had been building in Plano, with the patchy lawn and the front porch that held the smell of summer rain. So I stayed quiet. Sometimes quiet is a dam. Trevor raised his glass again. "2 nobodies," he said, smirking. "Without them, who would fix the AC when the office overheats?" The table drank. Emily took a drink too. I watched her throat move and tried to remember the last time she had defended me in public and could not, which felt like a small door closing. The waiter floated in and out with sides. Cream spinach, potatoes that snapped open like secrets. The talk returned to a campaign and a budget, and a celebrity who might post a thing for a price. I let their words wash me to the edges where I could observe. I saw Emily lean toward Trevor to explain a slide deck. I saw the way he listened, the way his eyes stayed on her mouth as if the words came directly from there. When she reached for her wine, his knuckles brushed her wrist. It was nothing. It was everything. That is how betrayal walks into a room, on tiptoe, in dress shoes. When we left, the night air felt like a hand to the face. The valet jogged up with our car. Emily linked her arm with mine and said, "You were so good tonight." "Which part?" I asked. "The calamari or the nobody?" She flinched, which made me immediately sorry, and then just as quickly not sorry enough. "Trevor was being Trevor," she said. "You know how he is." "I don't," I said, "but I'm learning." On the drive home, the skyline dropped behind us like a curtain, and the highway opened into long black lanes. She talked about an upcoming gala, about how the CEO might attend, about a bonus if the numbers kept climbing. I nodded and made all the right noises because she needed a certain story about me, and I was not ready to take it from her. The lanes hissed by. We passed a billboard promising second chances. We did not read it out loud. Our neighborhood greeted us with quiet and the hum of distant sprinklers. The porch light we'd put on a motion sensor blinked awake as we walked up the path. Inside, she kicked off her heels and stood for a moment in the doorway, the way you do when you've left a version of yourself out in the world and you are not sure it will find its way home. "I'm sorry he said that," she told the darkness. "He thinks he's funny." "I know what he thinks," I said. "I'm more interested in what you think." Her breath hitched, not quite a sigh. "I think you're good to me," she said. "I think that should be enough." It was late. Sometimes the body is kind enough to end conversations the mind can't finish. She went to shower. I collected the mail from the counter, a week's worth rubber banded together. Coupon books, a postcard from my buddy Mark with a fish on it, a Nordstrom receipt tucked into an envelope addressed to Emily, a credit card bill that felt heavier than it needed to. In the bathroom, the water hammered tile like rain. I set the mail down and stared at the wall where our wedding photos lined up in frames. Each version of us looking at the camera as if the future were a person we were happy to meet. I slept badly. Dawn came in pale and dubious. Emily left early with coffee in a paper cup and a kiss on my cheek that landed like a business transaction. I watched her taillights slide down the street, and it occurred to me that silence, if you hold it long enough, turns into a ledger. It accumulates. It keeps score. I opened the credit card bill. The numbers do what numbers do. Tell the truth with no regard for the hearts of men. There was a charge from a bar near Clyde Warren Park on a Tuesday. I remembered eating meatloaf at home. There was a dress from Nordstrom. There were 2 ride shares in a row from late on a Thursday night, one to an address downtown and one home from a hotel. I put the paper down. The room made a sound I couldn't place, and I realized the sound was me breathing. They had called me a nobody in a room full of people, and I had stayed quiet. I was still quiet, but the quiet had changed. It had muscle and memory. It had a plan, though I didn't know it yet. Somewhere in the city, a man with a red tie smiled at his reflection. Somewhere, my wife applied lipstick in a windshield and chose a version of herself that looked the part. And somewhere in that same city, a truth was sharpening itself on the edge of my name, waiting for its moment to be told. At first, I tried to forgive the night as a one-off misfire, a bad joke in a cold room. Work is strange. People put on masks to survive under fluorescent lights and titles. I told myself that I loved Emily more than I disliked a sentence, and that love would win if I fed it. So I made coffee early. I mowed the lawn even though the sun fired darts at my neck. I went to Kroger and bought the cereal she liked and the good blueberries that taste like August even in January. I put a sticky note on the fridge that said, "Have a great day, E." I meant it, but meaning doesn't always move the needle. That week she was homeless. Wednesday she texted at 6:52 p.m., running late, big deck due, don't wait up. Thursday her Lexus hummed into the driveway at 11:17 p.m., and when she came in, her heels were in her hand and her eyes were bright, the way eyes are after a room full of people say your name and you like how it sounds. Friday she left a garment bag zipped up in the hall closet, tags sticking out like the corners of secrets. Saturday she slept until 10, then scrolled her phone for an hour like a swimmer counting laps. On Sunday, my buddy Mark Johnson swung by with a 6-pack and a story. Mark works security in one of the towers off McKinney Avenue, the kind with a lobby chandelier that looks like the Milky Way, and a security badge that opens doors I will never enter. He's the kind of friend who notices more than he says. We sat on the back steps, the wood warm under us, the cans sweating in our hands. "I saw Em last week," he said. "Yeah?" I said, casual. "Down there?" "Twice," he said. "Tuesday and Thursday. Looked sharp as a knife, with Collins." He said the name like a caution. "Late?" I asked. He tipped his head. "The building thins out after 8. They weren't alone." "You sure you want to tell me this?" I said, because friendship is also a ledger, and sometimes the things you put in it can't be balanced. "I'm sure I don't want to keep it to myself," he said. "I've seen you carry heavy things. This isn't the kind that goes on your back." I stared at the fence where the cedar has grown tired of being a fence and started being a suggestion. A kid down the street let loose a laugh that flew over our rooftops like a bird that didn't know about gravity. "Thanks," I said. It didn't feel like the right word, but it was the one I had. That night I asked Emily how she liked the new Lexus. She smiled, relieved I wasn't asking something else. "It's a lease," she said. "Company helps." "Trevor approved that?" I asked. Her eyes flickered. "The board approves budgets," she said, and took her plate to the sink as if the sink had requested rescue. I started paying attention the way tech guys say they pay attention to data. I observed, on her vanity, a perfume I hadn't smelled before, a sparkly little bottle that looked like a promise you can't keep. In the trash under the bathroom sink, a receipt from a wine bar on a night I had watched baseball alone. On her phone, turned face down a little more often than it used to be. One evening she took a call on the patio and said, "You're impossible," and then laughed in the way you laugh when someone is not impossible at all. I am not proud of what I did next, but I am not ashamed either. I wrote down license plate numbers in the Omni Dallas garage during my lunch break and memorized the way their elevators ding like a polite throat clear. I learned how to ask the desk at the wrong hotel for the wrong name to see what they corrected me to. I made friends with a valet manager who thinks people with tool belts are salt of the earth. I paid him cash for information he gave me as a favor, because he believes in balances too. "On the 23rd, he said, flipping through his mental ledger, "black Lexus. In at 7:18 p.m., out at 11:42. Room paid by card ending in 0037. He kept talking, but my mind had already landed on the number. I had seen that ending on our kitchen island more times than I wanted to count. I hired a private investigator because television has taught us that sometimes a stranger can bear your truth better than you can. His name was Rick Sanchez, and he wore the world's most tired sport coat and the smile of a man who knows everyone you don't. He met me in a booth at a diner in Richardson with a legal pad and a pen that clicked. He didn't judge. He took notes. He asked for dates, habits, the name of the hotel I couldn't stop thinking about, the color of the dress in the garment bag, the pattern of late nights, the way my wife's voice changed when she used the word "we." "She works in marketing," I said. "So she knows how to tell a story," he said, writing. "We'll follow the facts." The first envelope from Rick came 10 days later by courier. It weighed almost nothing and felt like a brick. Inside were photographs that were not pornography, which somehow made them worse. People fully dressed can be more naked than people without shirts if they are standing under the wrong light. Emily and Trevor at the Omni's bar, leaning toward each other like parentheses around a joke. Emily's hand on his forearm, white blue light from a lobby lamp painting her skin. A printed receipt for a single king, 2 drinks posted to the room, a street camera still of the Lexus sliding into the garage, time-stamped 1917. Another of it leaving, 2341, her hair in a loose bun that has always meant she is done pretending for the day. I sat at our kitchen table, while the light went from afternoon to evening, and the photos stared back at me. I thought of the word nobody and how efficiently it had found me. I thought of how much of my life had been spent keeping other people comfortable, homeowners whose units I saved in August heat, customers whose vents I cleaned like a confessor, my wife, whose career I celebrated with takeout and flowers and 1,000 tiny yeses. I was a man built for service, for making things run just a little smoother. It turns out I had become the smooth surface on which other people skated. The next morning, Emily left for work, wearing the navy dress again and a jacket that looked expensive. I watched her back out of the driveway and wanted to run out and wave my arms and stop the car like it was a train, leaving a station in an old movie. But quiet. Always the quiet. Instead, I sat down again and called Rick. "Keep going," I said. "I need enough truth to be undeniable." "Undeniable," he repeated, and wrote it down like a job title. That afternoon, while replacing a condenser fan for a couple in Garland who apologized for the mess of their life as if I hadn't seen worse, a thought unfolded in my mind with the calm of a solution. If the insult had been public, the reckoning must be public too. The company had an end-of-year gala 2 weeks away at a hotel with chandeliers that tried too hard. Emily had been shopping for it. She had mentioned how the CEO might attend. Trevor would be there, red tie and all, throwing his smile around like confetti. If you are going to correct a story people tell about you, if you're going to take the word nobody and hand it back to the man who mailed it, you do it where the story was born. When I got home, the lawn needed cutting again, and the mail said so many things in the language of envelopes. I sharpened the mower blade because sharper tools make cleaner lines, and then I stood in our bedroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I am not a dramatic man, but some moments require theater. I tried on the suit from our wedding, and it fit differently and the same. I thought about how to print a hotel receipt on thick paper. I thought about screens and projectors and the way a room goes quiet when the truth appears 10 feet tall. Underneath those thoughts, a smaller voice said, "Be kind. Even now, be kind. Not to them, to yourself." Revenge stories on the internet make it look like victory tastes sweet. It often tastes like paper and silence. Still, I was hungry for it. When the Omni Dallas fills with company money in December, the chandeliers glitter like they are paid by the watt. The ballroom smelled of lilies and ambition. A step-and-repeat backdrop guarded the entrance, where people took photos they would pretend to hate and then post. Emily walked in on my arm with the grace of a person who understands how rooms work. She was wearing a silver dress that gathered at the waist and made the cameras interested. The dress was a promise and a warning. I felt, for one dizzy second, proud to be the guy beside her, even though pride had been cauterized in me recently. People greeted her by name. People greeted me with the careful warmth you give a spouse you don't know how to categorize. Trevor was already there, of course, red tie finding the light in every direction. He lifted his glass toward us in a casual salute that made my hand tighten on the little fold of paper in my jacket. The copy of the hotel invoice printed on cardstock, the color of vanilla ice cream. I had more. I had photos in an envelope in my inner pocket. I had a flash drive in my wallet in case the ballroom manager decided he liked me. I had planned as if planning could keep my hands from shaking. Before the program started, the CEO did the rounds with a practiced smile that you could see from space. "You must be David," he said to me, offering a hand that had made bigger deals than any I would ever see. "Emily talks about your work ethic. We appreciate the support at home. Makes this possible." He meant it like a compliment. It landed like a line item. "Glad to help," I said. It was true, once. The truth had gone brittle. When the lights dipped and the MC muttered through achievements, I watched Trevor at the head table tilt his head to laugh on cue. I watched Emily arrange her face. I remembered Mark's voice on my back steps and Rick's envelope, and the way numbers do not lie even when people do. I felt the quiet in me stretch like a bridge to carry me from the person I had been to the person I needed to be for the next 20 minutes. At the end of the awards, someone called Trevor up to give a toast. Of course they did. He stood with the cordless mic and a confidence that could open automatic doors. "To our team," he said, "who turned a tough year into a record one. To our partners, our clients, to the families who support us." He nodded toward the crowd, eyes sweeping, finding faces to land on. "And to the spouses who put up with our late nights. Emily, you especially, your work." He didn't finish because I was walking toward him. I did not have a plan for the exact first sentence. It turns out you don't need one when the truth is impatient. I climbed the 2 steps to the low stage and put my free hand up in a gesture so gentle, even the security guy in the corner paused. "May I borrow that?" I asked, and took the microphone before anyone decided whether I could. "David," Emily said from our table, the one clap of my name like a warning shot. "Hi," I said into the mic, which made my voice too big for my body. "I'm David Miller. I fix air conditioners. Some of you know me as Emily's husband. Some of you know me as nobody. Tonight I'd like to fix a different kind of system." Laughter attempted to form in a corner of the room and died politely. The chandeliers leaned down to listen. Trevor smiled like a man playing a hand he could not possibly lose. I pulled the cardstock from my jacket and held it like a wedding invitation. "On the 23rd of last month," I said, "room 1914 at this hotel. Billed to a card ending in 37. Drinks for 2 posted to the room. Check in at 7:18 p.m., check out at 11:41 p.m. The guests were not married to each other. They were, however, employed together." Someone gasped in the way people gasp when a magician finally shows the coin. I placed the copy of the invoice on the podium and slid a second sheet from my inside pocket, a print of the garage timestamps. "In at 1917, out at 23:41, I said. "The Lexus is in the photos. The faces are in the lobby pictures. I have more, but we're among professionals, and time is money." I turned the envelope toward the front row. The CEO's smile had gone into witness protection. The HR director's pen hovered like a dragonfly over a pond. Trevor's face performed a complicated math equation. How many bridges between this room and his future could still be crossed with the shoes he was wearing? Emily had gone pale in that way that makes people step closer out of something like love or curiosity or both. "David," Trevor said, too loudly, "this is wildly inappropriate." Inappropriate, I repeated into the mic, because echoing can be an art. Like insulting a spouse in front of the team, like billing your affair to a corporate card, like telling stories about who matters and who doesn't. I smiled a smile I had not known I possessed. It wasn't vengeful, it was clear. I stayed silent at dinner because I didn't want to make a scene. Tonight I'm making one so I can stop making them in my head. The ballroom manager had been hovering near the AV table the whole time, enjoying the free theater every hotel secretly prays for. I held up the flash drive and asked, could we show a few still images? Nothing graphic. PG-13. He took the drive as if I had handed him communion, and within a minute the two lobby photos appeared on dual screens like a confession that had hired good lighting. In the first, Emily and Trevor leaned toward each other at the bar, the world falling away in the precise way the dishonest need it to fall. In the second, they stepped into an elevator with a double reflection that made the truth look like it had clones. I didn't look at the screens. I watched the room. I watched the CFO's mouth tighten. I watched a junior analyst cover her face and peer through her fingers like a child watching a scary movie. I watched the HR director make a note, cross it out, write something else. The sound of 100 people adjusting their opinion is like a field of grass changing direction in the wind. Enough, Emily said, standing, voice shaking. David, please. Please is a good word. It has service built into it. For 10 years I had organized my life around other people's pleases. I felt a grief so clean it might have been a blessing. I'm almost done, I said. I wanted the people who heard the original story to hear this one too. Then I will sit down and you can resume your gala with whatever version of reality suits you. I handed the microphone back to the MC, who looked like he wanted to move to another state, and I stepped off the stage. People made space the way water makes space for a boat it didn't see coming. As I passed Trevor, he hissed, "You'll regret this." I paused, turned, and pitched my voice for him alone. I did, for about a month, I said. Then I got tired. Back at our table, Emily's hands shook on the linen. She didn't reach for me, I didn't reach for her. A server arrived to clear plates no one had eaten. The room tried to reboot with a jazz standard, but truth once projected stays in the air like humidity. It curls hair. It ruins suits. If you've watched enough Reddit stories or revenge stories online, you expect fireworks after a reveal. You expect security to escort someone out, or a punch, or a slap that makes a perfect TV sound. None of that happened. The CEO walked quietly to HR. The HR director walked quietly to Trevor. A colleague I'd never met put a hand on Emily's shoulder, the way you steady a person on a boat. I finished my water, which tasted like hope and regret. Then I stood and left. The night air outside was cool and ordinary. The valet, bless him, jogged up, recognized me from the photos he'd probably seen on break, and said, "Sir," with a respect he hadn't earlier. The word sir can sound like pity or like solidarity. This time it sounded like both. The week after the gala, Dallas felt like a town small enough to run into yourself. At Kroger, a man I didn't know clapped my shoulder near the avocados and said, "You did what you had to." At the shop, a customer whose compressor I'd replaced in August asked me, careful as a nurse, how I was holding up. At the gas station, a stranger paid for my coffee and didn't say why. In a city of 2 million, people knew. News moves quickly when it has a stage and a villain and a nobody who borrowed a microphone. At home, quiet took on a new shape. Emily stayed with her sister 2 nights and then 3. The silver dress disappeared from the closet, and so did one of our wedding photos from the hall. She texted a long message full of apologies and rationalizations, braided together like a rope that couldn't pull either of us to shore. She wrote about pressure and late nights and loneliness and a promotion that felt like walking across a frozen lake while pretending you weren't listening for cracks. She said she had loved me, present tense and past, in a way that made tense feel like a cruel joke. She asked to talk. I said we could. We did. We sat at our kitchen table at 7:04 p.m. on a Wednesday, the timestamp I will always attach to the moment. Our marriage became something you talk about in the past, with tenderness, but not with ownership. She cried, the quiet, contained kind that says, "I am still in control." She said the affair hadn't been about me. I believed her, and found that I was angrier for exactly that reason. She said Trevor had been suspended pending an investigation. She said she might resign before they asked. She said she had betrayed me and herself, and some version of the girl in the wedding photo, who had looked like she'd invented joy. I'm not going to perform forgiveness in public, I said. I'm not going to perform rage either. I'm going to choose peace for me. It sounded like a line you read in a book at 3 in the morning, but I meant it. Peace is an active verb. It has to be done every hour. We split the house the way you split any ordinary life. This chair yours, that one mine. The plant we always kill in winter went with her. The ugly lamp I secretly loved stayed. We talked about lawyers and used their names as if they were weather. There would be forms and signatures and the kind of administrative sorrow that turns heartbreak into paperwork. I made lists in a notebook. Cancel the cell plan, separate the streaming, call the bank, return the mixer her mother gave us. I wrote, in the margin next to everything else, breathe. The internet, which loves infidelity stories and family drama and Reddit stories packaged into tidy rage, found me in small ways. A cousin messaged a link to a thread titled something like, "He exposed his cheating wife at a work gala and asked if it was me." I didn't answer. People want to turn your life into content because content feels safer than empathy. I turned off notifications, then turned off my phone, then turned the phone face down on the kitchen table, the way Emily used to, just to see if the gesture felt like power. It didn't. The gesture that felt like power was washing the dinner dishes while the radio played a baseball game, and the room smelled like lemon soap and ordinary air. Mark came by with takeout and stubborn kindness. We ate on the back steps again because the steps have become our church. You kept your dignity, he said, like a diagnosis. I also kept a copy of the invoice, I said, because humor is how the body ventilates. He knocked his can against mine. To nobody, he said. To nobody, I agreed, and we drank to the idea that sometimes the label they staple to you turns into armor. In the slow, watchful weeks, I noticed other things that had nothing to do with betrayal and everything to do with being alive. The neighbor girl learned to ride her bike without training wheels, and the whole block applauded. The guy 2 doors down built a pergola and then invited everyone under it because shade is a communal achievement in Texas. A customer in Garland mailed a handwritten note that said, "Thanks for getting our cold air back," and slid in a gift card I used to buy myself a pair of boots that didn't pretend to be fancy, only honest. I started a small side business doing preventive maintenance for older folks who can't climb into attics anymore. I printed cards that said, "Miller Mechanical, we keep what matters running." The first time I handed one to a stranger, he read it and said, "That's a good line." It felt like I had given myself a name. One Saturday, I met Rick at the same diner to settle the last bill. He slid the envelope back across the table. "You want me to hold on to these?" he asked. "No," I said, and took the photographs home. I built a small fire in the grill and fed the photos in, one by one, not like an exorcism but like a ritual of basic sanitation. Paper curls beautifully under heat. The smoke rose into a blue day and smelled like nothing but paper. When the last corner went black, I closed the lid and sat with the soft ticking sounds a grill makes when the flame is finished. I did not feel triumph. I felt clean. Emily texted me a month later from a new apartment near White Rock Lake, with a view of joggers and dogs. She was seeing a therapist and had started walking in the evenings without her phone. She had resigned before the company made it official. She said she was sorry again, which I believed and hoped I was well, which I was, in pieces that were learning to fit together into a different shape. I answered that I wished her peace and meant it, because wishing someone curiosity or punishment is a way of tying yourself to them, and I was done with knots. When we signed the final document in a neutral office that smelled like folders, she reached for my hand, and I let her hold it for exactly 3 seconds. A goodbye long enough to honor what had been, short enough to protect what would be. We walked out into a day that had not asked for our grief, and did not know what to do with our relief. You want a moral, because stories about betrayal don't feel complete without a neat line to stitch them closed. Here is mine. If a moral is required, people will tell you who you are, loudly, with conviction, with laughter and toasts and red ties. If you are not careful, you will start to believe them. If you are lucky, truth will arrive with receipts and timestamps and a merciless kindness that forces a recalibration. After that, you can choose the version of yourself you bring to the table. I choose the man who fixes broken systems, who stays quiet until silence becomes complicity, and then speaks with enough clarity to cut through the fog. I choose the nobody who, when the room fell still, discovered he had been somebody the whole time. On a Wednesday evening that tasted like early summer, I stood on my porch and watched a thunderhead build itself over the flat horizon. The air went electric and then broke into rain. I stepped out into it in my work shirt and let it wash the dust from my hair and my shoulders. Across the street, the neighbors' wind chimes did their bright, chaotic work. Cars hissed by, wipers snapping. My phone buzzed in my pocket with something I could answer later. Inside, the radio called strikes. In the driveway, the new boots took water without complaint. And there, under a Texas sky doing what Texas skies have always done, I felt a steadying that had nothing to do with revenge, everything to do with peace. Sometimes, the only applause you need is the rain.